Good morning, everyone. And I'm here to, my name is Bob Meese. As Todd said, I'm the head of games business development for Google Play. And I'm here to talk to you today about running a successful games business with Google. I'll primarily talk about two different things. So talking about the various Google services that we believe are most helpful to game developers in building your business. And then I'll also highlight some of the best practices from the various developers in the ecosystem. And I want to thank the developers that helped me put together that material. So let's begin. And first, you'll see some of the slides that many of us present. Greg presented this too, but there's a couple of reasons why you'll see these over and over again. And one is because they're very important metrics that lay the foundation for the platform, and also because we're very proud of some of these accomplishments of the platform overall that we've achieved with all of your help. But first, you should all know that Android is a very big platform. There's more than 1 billion monthly active Android users globally now, which creates a huge opportunity for everyone. And as we've said, more than 3 in 4 of those people are playing games. And so when you combine those two facts, you have a huge user base, many of whom are playing games. That's the largest group of people playing games on any platform ever. And then finally, what that translates into you. Last week, we announced that we had paid out more than $7 billion to developers over the past 12 months. So there's a very clear commercial opportunity for developers today, and that number just keeps rising and rising. And so in terms of the main agenda for today, so I first want to share a few tips on working with all of us. Then I want to talk about recommendations that we have across the life cycle of all of your games, from development to operations of all your games. So first, working with us. So here's the team we're growing. So if I had shown you this slide 3 years ago, it would have been just Yoshiko and myself. It was just the 3 of us. But now here's the team. A couple of key points to mention. In the Bay Area here in Mountain View, we've been hiring some world-class game experts. In APAC, what started with just an office in Japan has now expanded into Korea and Taiwan in Southeast Asia. In Europe, we're growing the team there as well. Unfortunately, Mobile World Congress is this week as well, but Dima is still here to join us from Russia. And then we should note that we hired Regina late last year as our head for Latin America, and we recently expanded to a new continent. And so the key message here is that wherever you are, we're hiring people and building teams to support you. And I also want to talk about expanding our developer support as well, too, because just hiring people is not the end goal. It's important that we improve our online tools, because email and LinkedIn inboxes can't be the final answer to this. For us, I know that it's hard to manage that overall process, and so I want everybody to know here that we're investing in our online tools to help us further qualify new developers that we work with. And so if you go to this short link right here, you can fill out a short form that'll help us better work with all of you. And the key point here is that we're investing in improving the overall communication channels between Google and the developer community, because we really do care about everyone's success. All right, in terms of the life cycle of game development and the various Google services and best practices, first I want to start with pre-launch. And so pre-launch is, you're about to launch your game, you haven't yet launched your game, you hopefully have this mountain of traffic that's about to come your way, and game launches are getting bigger and bigger, and at this moment, you really want to make sure that you've tested your game fully, so that if you're lucky enough to get hit by this mountain of traffic, that's a positive experience, that it doesn't crush your game. And we will note that the game launches are becoming bigger and bigger. They're in some cases even being compared to Hollywood movies. I was talking to Wooga recently, who launched a big game last week, and they'll be featured later on in the presentation. It was the first game that they had launched in 18 months. They actually spent 18 months developing this game, but they had talked about all of the activity that was going into it. They had invested all that time, and now that it was launching, they had a big budget, they had a big press outreach plan that was happening, and they said 18 months ago when they had launched their previous game, all they did was publish the game and issue a press release. And so we definitely see these launches changing, becoming bigger and bigger, and so in that environment, it's even more important that developers are doing proper beta testing for their games. And so in this case, we do offer Google Play beta testing as a key offering. It's been around for a while, but it's very important to us. We want to encourage as many developers as possible to use it. And so in terms of some of the basics of that service, So it is a private invite-only beta testing group that helps you all work on play testing and technical readiness of your games. We really focus on the communication channels that we both enable and disable during this process. And so it's important to know that ratings and reviews, that it doesn't exist during this time. It's not appropriate during the beta test period that people be able to publicly rate and review their game, and so that's impossible. However, we really do optimize the channel between the beta testers and the developer itself. This is all enabled through Google Groups, and we really focus on having as much communication as possible between testers and developers. And then we should note that 2 tracks are available, and so we have both an alpha and a beta testing track in case developers want to have multiple versions of their games being tested at the same time. So as I mentioned, this service has been around for a while, but we want more developers using it. We're seeing some developers like Matt and Ralph from Vector Unit that have Google Play beta testing as a standard part of their workflow. And we want to see more and more developers have this state. They were also nice enough to, in November, they wrote a blog post for Gamasutra that provided a lot of detail on their experience with Google Play beta testing. So I encourage all of you to go check that out. In terms of the summary in a quick slide, they encouraged all the developers to think about a couple of different things, one of which was really choosing your audience wisely. And so in their case, I mentioned that they did both an alpha and a beta channel. But they found that the beta channel was much more popular just because the game was more stable in that channel. And so in their case, in the alpha channel, it was a more unstable process. And so their friends and family were very helpful, very happy to use that version. But they noticed that the vast majority of players were on the beta channel. Also, setting expectations early is very important. And so it is important to know that your beta testers are using software that can be unstable in some cases, and so it's important to lay that foundation. Also, it's very important that you let people know that you really want feedback during this process. And so being very clear that part of the exchange on the players is to provide as much clear and detailed feedback as possible. And then finally, this beta testing process is all about feedback. And so encouraging as much feedback as possible is really the goal. Here, there's things that you can do as a developer to help enable that as well, too. And so within the forums, if you can reply very quickly to posts to help your community feel alive, Matt and Rel found that was really valuable. And even going so far as to thank those people that are leaving critical feedback, as long as it's constructive and detailed and clear, because that's really what you want out of this whole process. And next, I'll talk about pre-registration. And so as I talked about with beta testing, there's going to be a group of people who want to play your game no matter what state it's in. But pre-registration is largely about that next group of people, the fans that want to play your game as soon as it's publicly launched. And so the basic part of pre-registration is that it's a way for you to notify the fans of your games when your game first becomes available. And it's also, our APAC team has been telling us about pre-registration for a while. It's a practice that's very popular in leading markets like Korea and Japan. And we believe that it's a practice that will increasingly be popular worldwide. And so here's a few examples in Korea and Japan. And so on your left, there's an example of a small Korean developer. In case your Korean is not as good as those who are in Korea. So what's being offered here is there's an offer of about $10 of in-app items for free for anybody who pre-registers for the game before launch. This game is about to launch very soon, and this small developer has already registered 10,000 people for the game. And so for a small developer to have that amount of momentum for launch, it's a big advantage versus someone who hasn't gone through this process. And then on your left, you'll see Konami, who's a very successful Japanese developer. And this is an example of pre-registration for their game Power Pro Baseball. And you might see on the bottom here, you can see 1, 3, 5, and 10. And so these are different tiers or targets to pre-register in total 10,000, 30,000, 50,000, and 10,000 people. And if those goals are met, you can also see a cascade of various in-app items. And if those goals are met, all of the pre-registered players will receive those items at launch. And so this creates a referral system that encourages pre-registered players to go get their friends to also pre-register. And so that's one of the more intermediate systems within pre-registration. And so just as a quick recap on pre-reg, so the basic functionality is just notifying your fans that the game has launched and offering them some type of reward. A more intermediate system is introducing referral systems so that people have an opportunity to invite others and spread the word for your game. And then finally, there's even some more advanced systems where they have interactive events with Japanese developers, including gacha mechanics in the games, that allow players to win rare items in the game, so they have an advantage even from before the game even launches. Next, I want to talk about user acquisition. And so here, there's many things that developers are doing, but we bear some of the responsibility as well. And so when we think about the Play Store listing page, we did a nice redesign last year, basically adopting the material design principles within the Play Store itself. You can see Leo's Fortune pictured both on the left and the right. The left before the redesign, and then the right after material redesign. And what you'll notice is that there's several of the elements on the page that are really helpful to learn more about the game that are brought to life. And so here on the right, I'll call it the video that's featured right there at the top. And then also the short description at the bottom that's above the fold that's very visible as well too is really called out and more prominent in the new design. And so just going into a bit more detail on the store listing pages, the icon, is many developers know, is very important. You've put a lot of time and effort into your game. It's important that your icon reflect the quality of your game and the creativity and the personality of the game as well. And with Leopold here, I think that this developer has done a great job. On the right here with the description, it is important to quickly communicate the value of the game to your audience. And so here, just adventuring through a gorgeous handcrafted world for Cover Your Stolen Gold sounds pretty good to me. And so I think the developer has used that space well. On the bottom here, video, as we've talked about, is very important. It's the best way to capture the attention of your potential audience. And then to complement the video, we have screenshots on the right here. In these screenshots, you can do other things like layering on text here. And so in this case, the developer is really focusing on some of the critical acclaim and the awards that they've won. And so we find that to be very valuable. Next, I want to talk about a best practice of A/B testing icon design before your game goes live. And so here, this is an example of Glue in their game Deer Hunter 2014. And so in this case, they had all these different ideas and permutations on what their icon could look like, but they really wanted to make sure that they were converting as many people as possible from the store listing page and just the people who had viewed the icon down to those who had installed the game. And so through that process, through A/B testing of the various icon types, they ended up with the version of the icon at right. And you'll notice if you check out the game now, this A/B testing just continues through launch as well. They have a fully different version of the icon than any of these right now in the game too. And so just being very thoughtful about your icon and A/B testing it and optimizing for conversion is quite important. Next, I'll keep it short and sweet, but we encourage you as a best practice to keep your file sizes small. We notice a clear correlation between the games that have smaller file sizes and those that get the most installs. And so please, if possible, try to keep your games below the 50 megabyte OTA limit. Next, I'll talk about the Google Play referral flow report. And so this is something where developers often ask us, they say, I would love to know more about what is happening during the conversion funnel in the Play Store. I'd love to know how many impressions I'm getting and how that's converting to installs. That some developers don't know that's actually available now. And so what you need to do that is you connect your Google Analytics account to your Google Play Developer Console account. And by doing that, you can get data about the number of impressions that you're getting to your Play Store listing page, the number of installs you're getting from Play, and the number of opens that you're getting from that. And so it's a valuable source of data that I don't think enough developers know about. And so wanted to highlight that here today. Also, it's very exciting. We made an announcement last week about sponsored search results in Google Play. It's a pilot that will roll out in the next few weeks. And so I should note that it's still a very early stage pilot. We don't have a timetable for greater rollout. But over the long term, it is a project that we're very excited about. And then finally in this section, video, as I've talked about, is a very engaging medium. YouTube is obviously a great source of video content. And so here we see developers saying that video is working for them in general, and then Machine Zone has gone a step further. And it said that the players that they're acquiring through YouTube are higher value players than any other video platform. And so it's something that developers should certainly be looking at. All right, that's it for the user acquisition section. Next up is engagement retention. And so here I mentioned Wooga earlier, but they're really an example of the best practice of frequent content updates to help engage and retain your players. And so this is Jens here saying, like the best TV shows and Agent Alice, we deliver a new episode every week. They've really found that investing in story is really important for them, that the narrative of their previous games has been one of the elements that their core players and their target audience really enjoys about the game. And so there, it builds up a sense of expectation and anticipation that keeps players coming back over a very long time period, and that's the goal. And so just a quick one-slide overview of Wooga's most recent game, Agent Alice. And so here you can see on the upper left that, as Jens mentioned, they take a TV series approach where a new episode of the game is available every Thursday that keep players coming back and expecting that new episode. On the upper right, you can see that the developer layers on a variety of different length arcs. And so you have the core weekly arc that's built around the episode, but then you have the mid-arcs of the games. And so you have Agent Alice Wallace and all of her friends and all of the various things that they're doing in the game that keeps people engaged over a longer time. And then finally, you have the main arc of the game. And so Wooga is building this game and staffing the content production of it to last over years. And so it's really important that there's a way to connect that basic weekly cycle with a much longer time horizon. Of course, I should note that investing in content like this is not cheap. And so here, Wooga is investing 20 person-hours a week into content production. And so that, while this is a very effective strategy, it's also, it comes at an expense. But what that provides is a very rich character set in the game. And so they have more than 100 characters already in the game at launch, with 3 new characters coming every week. And so I think that this example of Wooga's Agent Alice is a great example of frequent content updates as a way to engage and retain your players. Next, I want to talk about Google Play Games, our games network, which is growing very rapidly. One of the things that we're excited to see is that Google Play Games is becoming an essential part of more developers' games. More developers are adopting the services overall, and that's helped fuel the overall growth. And one of the things that we see is that signed-in players are consistently more valuable than other players within developers' games. And as Ben and others had talked about before, we're investing into adding more and more services on top of the core of Google Play Games to make the services increasingly valuable over time. And so here is Oliver from Hothead Games saying that Google Play Games have become an essential part of their games. And when you think about why that is, so here's one of their games, Rivals at War Firefight, and they point out that signed-in players have 30% greater playtime per player and 2.3x greater premium currency spent per DAU. And so there, when you're seeing results like this, that really helps people understand that there's value in implementing these services. Also, I'd like to do a quick recap of player analytics. It's something where Ben presented it now, and John Burge will actually give a lightning talk on it in a little bit. But it's something we're very excited about, and I want to go into a bit more detail. And so as we talked about, there's managing targets. And so what happens here is that you're setting revenue goals, and you have a daily feedback loop to be able to check your progress against those targets. You can identify hotspots, and so we help you compare your game to similar games and identify areas where your game is doing particularly well and in areas where you have some gaps. And then finally, understanding your players, and so getting a better sense for when people are leaving your game and where people are leaving your game. And so here, the core of player analytics is a set of reports. And so as we showed here, managing your targets with the business drivers dashboard, identifying your hotspots with the business drivers report, and understanding your players with the retention table in the player progression report. And so as I said, we'll go into more detail on that, but it's something where it's early, but we're very excited about the potential here. Within managing targets, so you set a revenue goal, you can check daily progress. If you're exceeding your goals, which is great, then you may even consider raising them. But if you're not hitting your goals, then you want to look for hotspots. And that's where we move into identifying hotspots. And so here, one of the key benefits of player analytics is comparing your game to similar games across a variety of different cohorts of players who have been in the game for various amounts of time and across various key metrics like engagement and monetization. And there, being able to drill down for each of these different cells that are there. Each state is in one of 5 states. So from deep red, if you're underperforming, to deep green if you're overperforming, and so we provide you with a quick way to visualize your relative performance in your segment. And then finally, looking at understanding players, and so having the retention table to understand when your players are leaving the game, how long they're sticking around, and then the player progression report to understand how many achievements players are completing before they're leaving the game. And so, as I said, this is something that we're very excited about, and we encourage everybody to look into player analytics when it's available in a few weeks. Next, I want to talk about monetization. And so here like I said, it's an important number that we're very proud of, that last week we announced that we've paid out $7 billion to developers over the past 12 months. One of the things that has fueled that growth has been our investment in the payments platform. And so here, as we mentioned, we're investing in relationships with direct carrier billing, expanding our gift card support, and introducing PayPal in the last year. Just a bit more detail on that, too. So direct carrier billing is now available in 32 different countries. And one thing to note there is that since about the middle of last year, we really focus on where are the regions where we most need direct carrier billing. And so since the middle of last year, we've turned on a half dozen countries in Southeast Asia to help improve the monetization of that region. In the case of Google Play gift cards, they're now available in 28 different countries. If you're not following it as closely as some of the people on that team, at this time last year, only 7 countries had Google Play gift cards. And so in the course of 1 year, there's been a 4x increase in the number of countries that are Google Play gift card enabled. And so that's fueling big advantages and improvements in the overall payments platform. And then finally, PayPal, which only became available in the last year, is now available in 19 different countries, focused on the parts of the world where PayPal is most popular, including Western Europe and North America. Next, I want to talk about premium games. So as you can see from the top grossing charts, in-app purchase games, free-to-play games are driving most of the top grossing. But that does not mean that it's the only thing that should succeed on the platform. And so for us, you look at what are the games that are most successful right now, and you have Minecraft, you have Trivia Crack, the paid version, and you have Five Nights at Freddy's, and those are 3 examples of recently successful premium games. What we believe is that even if these are this category of games is not the major driver of platform revenue, we really do believe that there are many developers out there that love creating premium games, and we believe that there are many players on the platform that love playing premium games. And so it's important for us that this category continue to exist and do well. And so just wanted to leave you with those 2 things, that if you're making premium games, we believe that the category is important, and so know that, but also know that if you look at the trends, even if you look at Minecraft and its top grossing rank, it has declined over the last year or so. So just recognize that the overall trend in monetization is not with you, but that we want to find ways to support a very healthy ecosystem measured a bunch of different ways, and that includes premium games being successful on the platform. Furthering the story on monetization, next I want to talk about ads. And so here we want developers that have the flexibility to monetize through in-app purchase, through upfront payments in premium games, and also through advertising. Here we'll call out that AdMob is the largest mobile ads platform in the world, with more than 650,000 app and game developers monetizing with AdMob every month, including some of the notable game developers at the bottom of the page here. And so clearly there's great momentum behind AdMob. Talking about how developers earn with AdMob and some of the momentum. And so we're seeing growth in CPMs over time, which is a great sign of the health of that ecosystem. And the developers are earning significant money with ads as well, with more than $1 billion being paid out over the last 2 years. Also, we're investing in making it easier for all of you to get AdMob into your games, including the creation of plugins with leading game engines like Unity and Cocos 2DX. All right, next I want to talk about international. Very important topic when you think about those billions of devices that are out there with Android. Many of them are obviously not in this country. And so developers ask us, what are the most important countries? What are the countries that are growing that I should be targeting? And here's a couple of different categories. So there's, developers may be familiar with the largest revenue markets, but maybe not as much with those countries where you have the largest install base or the fastest growing install bases. And so the countries in those latter 2 categories of large install bases, fastest growing install bases are countries like Mexico and Brazil and Turkey, Indonesia, and Russia. And so if you're not targeting those countries today, we encourage you to do so. We're seeing a great amount of growth there. And really want to talk about how developers start to expand internationally. I was having a really good conversation with a leading developer on Friday, and they talked about how they had expanded their international strategy over time, where it was really a three-step process. At first, they were just focused on succeeding in their domestic market, and they felt that they were doing a good enough job there, and so then they started to expand internationally. But the second stage for them was going international, where it was kind of an even approach everywhere, and that's not something that can always be successful. It's some games are lucky enough to be able to address all international audiences fairly evenly, but this developer was calling out to the third stage that they were at right now is that targeting international audiences, but really thinking very specifically about each one. The way that their game should be different in Brazil versus Russia, for example, because those audiences are obviously different, and they want and deserve different content. And so with that, I'll go into a bit more detail. It's always interesting to look across the world about the games that are popular on Google Play and start to assess just how you might think about your games and which markets are relevant for you given your game. But in the United States, so we see a great amount of diversity still in the United States, with games from casual games to strategy games to social casino games to action RPGs, from developers all across the world, European developers, US-based developers, developers in Israel, developers in Asia. And so we certainly believe that success in the United States is still a goal for many different developers. And so that's part of what fuels the diversity and the greatness of the content here, is that developers from all over the world are trying to be successful in the United States. Next, if you look at Google Play in Japan, you'll notice Monster Strike and Puzzle & Dragons have been doing that very, very well there for a while, and so you'll learn that the Japanese love dragons. But then you'll also notice that combining different game systems is actually quite important. And so with Puzzle & Dragons, taking a puzzle game and adding RPG elements is really significant. With Monster Strike, taking an RPG and adding slingshot mechanics is their path to success. And so more complex gaming systems that are combined has been quite popular in Japan for some time. One thing we will note, too, is that Japan really stands out for being a relatively tough market for international developers to crack. If you look here, you're seeing a whole bunch of Japanese games plus Clash of Clans. But even in the case of Supercell, while they've had some success in Japan relative to some of the other markets where they've been in, even for them, it's not easy to get there. And so it's something where as attractive as the Japanese market could be, the Japanese developers have set the bar very high. And the Japanese consumers have grown accustomed to those games. And so it's important to be very thoughtful in terms of launching into Japan. In terms of Korea, and so here, historically, the Korean market is focused on a bunch of cute characters and animals in its games, largely through the success of local developers. However, that is starting to change with more and more international games seeing success in Korea. And one example is Supercell with Clash of Clans, where we could feel very tangibly that whenever Clash of Clans hit #1 top grossing in that market, that it did start to change perception in an exciting way about the opportunities for international developers to succeed in the local market. And it is actually having an impact on some of the strategies and tactics of how developers promote their games in Korea, where there's a lot more TV and out-of-home advertising that's taking place, and it's influencing a greater number of developers to have bigger campaigns themselves in this local market. Next, we'll focus on Taiwan. Taiwan, if you'll notice here, there's a great diversity, again, kind of similar to the US, where there's Japanese games, Korean games, local Taiwanese games, Western games, Chinese games. There's a lot that's here. One funny characterization, too, has been Taiwan is the Canada of APAC. And we say that as a way of just, for developers that are looking to beta test their games, it's a great first landing spot. If you're looking to target APAC overall, Taiwan can be a great test market for you, because obviously there's a great diversity of content that this audience is interested in. And in terms of just, if you're looking to spend to acquire some of these users, prices in Taiwan are still cheaper than many other markets. And then finally in this section, in Russia, there definitely are some differences in certain markets. And Russia is very characteristic in terms of the games that are played there. And so you'll see a greater focus on hardcore games in Russia. And so you do have Heyday here, but outside of that, not much casual games in the top of the charts in Russia. A greater focus on some of the best games that are there domestically in terms of World of Tanks and Wargaming. But in general, there's some clear themes towards more hardcore gaming in markets like Russia. And so if that's what you make, that's great. However, if that's not what your games are about, then you may want to look elsewhere. So anyway, I really hope that this was valuable to you in terms of tips for working with us and the various recommendations that we have across the life cycle of your games in terms of pre-launch, in terms of user acquisition, in terms of engagement and retention, monetization, and international. And I really encourage you guys to stick around for the lightning talks, which will happen very soon. And just thank all of you all. We'll be around through the course of the day, so hope you enjoy the Google Developer Day today.